video of me trying to define autism with only a little bit of Googling beforehand to double check some things while eating applesauce and showing the inner workings of my brain. So the main thing is autism is a neurological developmental difference condition, or the worst one, dun dun dun, disorder. That's like the technical name from the good old DSM-5, which there's a lot I can say about that, but that's a whole other thing. That's like the technical, they call it, they really hammer the disorder thing. But it's just a difference. It's a developmental difference. It's kind of like eye color or just something with the brain during the developmental phase of your life. Go figure. Is something was just happened or something didn't happen that happens in the majority of people. And I think in like the technical thing is synaptic pruning in the brain. That's what's supposed to happen in people who aren't autistic or some form of neurodivergent, but it didn't happen in the autistic person because I don't know, genetic lottery or something, the randomness of life, chaos. But it didn't happen. So, and synaptic pruning, to my understanding, is like regular pruning, like a gardener pruning, let's say a bush to look like Garfield or something like that. That's what's supposed to happen in a regular brain, where all the unnecessary things are trimmed out. Things that like might make you sensitive to sensory inputs, or things that might make it so you don't take in as much information. All of that isn't pruned out. So you just have this overwhelming amount of information and data thrown at you at all times. So it's kind of like you are sensitive to everything, and like almost in like a superhero way, but in the same way is also very overwhelming. I kind of like to think about it as like when Superman as a kid first gets his powers, and he's like seeing through walls and then seeing it, or Spider-Man in a way, and just like everything is sensitive and it's just a spider sense in a way, like everything is overwhelming and you could see things differently, and it's like just a lot basically. It's just like it's like opening every tab or opening 100 tabs on a browser or something, and it just you start to get bogged down a little bit, and it's harder to like focus on like smaller things because it's just like everything's happening at once. Or another way to put it is like, um, I don't really know, I can't really compare, but I like to imagine that quote unquote let's say non-autistic person's brain is like an automatic car, but like an autistic person's brain is like trying to drive manual, which I never done, but like I'd imagine just by looking at it's like a whole bunch of it's like other gears and knobs and things in the car. Is just you have to do everything by hand instead of just cruising. That's the closest way I could explain it. Then it's kind of another way to put it with the developmental thing is like it's things are unbalanced. So you could have like your stats or your settings in your brain are just all over the place. You could be really great at this one thing, and like the the outdated term is idiot savant, or it's just like someone is super, or like the common thing is like Rain Man, where it's you can do these math things and blah blah blah, it's so amazing, but you can't interact with people like in a socially acceptable way, or doesn't interact with people how most people do. So it's like that's like the stereotypical version of it, but it varies. It could be you're really good at learning certain things, and it's not always like an academic thing. You could just it's whatever you happen to be interested in. It could be anything. It could be Pokemon. It could be video games. It could be math. It could be cars. It could be knitting. It could literally be anything. Just whatever your brain latches onto. But it's like to a extreme degree for the most part. And then differences, and the obvious one is like socializing, just something being off, or just a sneaky little something to kind of sets you apart from other people. That's a or awkwardness at its best, but like it's usually a thing that isn't really noticed at first is like the internal part of it. Like it's not just it's probably people it's not necessarily that someone is like just bad at socializing. It's probably that the environment is so hectic to them because of the way that their brain is just taking in everything, every little sound, every little texture, every little like just being around the people, being looked at, eye contact, all of that. Since all of that's being thrown at them, it makes conversations awkward because you can't focus. It's like trying to, I guess, trying to multitask or something, like trying to, I don't feel like making an example. It's already too long. But all of that thrown into it. And then there's things with like not being able to process your emotions or emotional dysregulation, or if I think that's the technical name. So that could lead to various a collapse. That's kind of like the new word for it. I kind of like that a little bit better, but like it's also called like uh, melt meltdowns or tantrums, whatever. That too, like something that seems like it's just a big freak out, but it's like all this inner pressure and whatnot building up from the way that your brain works, the overstimulation and whatnot, and just not even being able to like feel. Let's say I identify your emotions as they're happening necessarily, or kind of being numb to them, disassociating from them in a way. So it's kind of like stuff just happens out of nowhere, and it's kind of like hard to prevent it or see it coming. Also, along with the emotions, all this like the processing thing and being different, and most of the time being like outcasted, and even if you aren't outcasted, at best having to pretend so you aren't completely socially isolated, can kind of weigh on you mentally, and that's a whole other thing, and it kind of starts to overlap with various traumas and acronyms and things like that. CPS, CPTSD, regular PTSD, I guess, but complex PTSD and just various things from like uh, just having a general rough time around people, and like in what would just be a regular scenarios for most people is like just like on hard mode for you, apparently, like just normal things like school, going places, to social events, life. So that kind of gets a little depressing after a while. Not being able to express yourself around other people, you're gonna be sort of isolating. You could probably like express yourself by yourself or write things or have an inner world or inner dialogue that's rich and vibrant and blah blah blah. But like trying to actually communicate to other people with the eyes and the sensory things and the vibes, I guess, like just being around people just is a whole other thing. Like the reason, like you're like, but you're doing this right now. It's like, yeah, because there's literally nobody around me. Everybody else is asleep right now. It's just me, and this is like a one-sided thing. Like I guess technically I could give a lecture to like nobody in the room. Like that's the way my brain works. Like I could I could it would be amazing. I already know. I'm not tooting my own horn, but I'm just it would be long and it would be like all over the place, but um, it would flow sort of. So it's like if it's one sided, but then that's not a conversation. So when you put me in a social situation, then it's just like I don't even want to open my mouth because it's just gonna be like it's gonna be like this at best, or at worst, it's just gonna be really choppy and like my brain is somewhere else because it's distracting being for some the just the build the way I'm built apparently constructed by never mind. And it really wouldn't be as bad or depressing if it was like uh not like completely separated, but just like the people who had this sort of way of being, this developmental difference, or like just allowed to do their own sort of thing. And they kind of do that in schools, like sort of like the gifted program, but that's a whole other thing. I wasn't in it, but like that's a whole other topic talking about the gifted kid burnout. That's you could check that out. But like if the differences were just honored instead of like trying to make kids force them to be in one. I guess that's just in general. Like, hey, this is already 10 minutes. I can't critique the whole education system. But yeah, that would definitely make a pretty big difference. At first, that's just a nice place to start, and then going on into the workplace and just social whatevers and the awareness that people think differently, or like some people just kind of have like a preference towards like visual things, and it's like that because then it starts to, because if you like only have a one way of thinking, it's like this is like, for example, for me, I don't really like reading that much, but I like more visual audio things. So if it's like a mixture of that, or like just reading plain text is like, that's just kind of for me. I can do it. I'm literate, you know. Thankfully, I wasn't left behind by the school system, just barely, but I made it out. But like yeah, like have like just allowing people to thrive in what they thrive in instead of trying to like just make everybody do it. But again, that's the U.S. education system. I don't know. I won't make this all uh, any more pessimistic and just completely uh, rant about the school system. I'm just glad I'm already done with it. Like, sheesh. Good luck to the rest of y'all. In conclusion, there are so many things in terms. It's like could be overwhelming, but it's kind of interesting. Like the alexithymia, and it's like a lot of overlapping whatnots and the possible connection with autism and ADHD, which I try not to think about that one too much because it's just like too much to even like. I just barely got used to the one, so I don't. But yeah, there's overlap with that too, and just the overall way that the brain can develop and how it kind of varies from day to day is with like just like with anyone else. But sometimes I guess or not sometimes, but the capacity is sort of the main difference in people who are neurodivergent, specifically autistic. Just like like let's say the social capacity, or what people like to call the social battery, is different in autistic people, or the way that they have to kind of really plan ahead and possibly recover after social events more than other people, or so, or really uh, be strategic about the way that they do it when they go out and who they go out with and such and so forth. Boundaries and blah 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 and all that. It's a lot of yapping. I should probably start potting. And I love the unfocused look of this, like what the it's supposed to be a halo effect. Beyonce. All right. That's another thing. I guess apparently it's quite common for autistic people to kind of just thinking like it depends, but Templeton Grandin, which fantastic name. Uh, I don't. You just have to look her up. I don't. She's like she a scientist of some sort, like a agricultural sort of, or specifically having to do with like farm animal scientist. That's I'm not 100% sure, but it's like a lot of her biopic was, I don't know about, but anyway, she has like TED talks and things like that, and probably books and whatnot. But I think she talks about like thinking in pictures or images, and that's kind of like I kind of relate to that, but like with music and just like in references, like you hear that a lot. With that's also another thing of like with autism, like repeating things, at least early on. Like eventually, a big part of it too, why stuff goes under the radar and people get our late diagnosis, because you do these things, these apparently weird behaviors, and either get called out for it or kind of just like look around and you're like, oh, you feel somehow the shame kind of gets to you, and it's like, so you just basically hide and suppress everything that makes you you. and that leads to a whole host of problems. But yeah, so various things, different weird movements, or what could be viewed as odd movements or repeating things that you hear, and just kind of be, it seems to be a common thing of like being glued to the TV, or like really liking TV and different TV references, and kind of learning from TV and movies and really absorbing that. And then this video is never going to end. And then it's another thing of like the stereotypical autistic behaviors. It's kind of interesting. I don't know if it's a debate, but just like a dialogue. Let's say a dialogue of like what is autistic and what is a traumatized autistic person type of thing. Like when it comes to the specific behavior, like the rigid behaviors, is it because your environment is so chaotic because everything is amplified for you and you're more sensitive to things that you want the routine, or is it just you naturally like routine? And it's kind of like it's it's one of those questions like the chicken or the egg type of thing. But either way, that's another part of it too, of like wanting uh, order and doing the quote unquote doing the same thing every day and eating better. Like that's the Rain Man movie kind of got that. They got that part right, I guess. Like they got it wasn't like wrong per se. It was just like a really extreme example, and it's like unfortunate that like everybody just took that movie and ran with it. It's like, oh, well, that's just how everyone is. Like, damn, imagine if everybody did that with like inserts a movie. And then there's even the physical things beyond just like the neurological stuff. Although you can't necessarily look autistic in any significant way. I mean, maybe like after interacting with somebody, you can kind of tell like, okay, they socialize differently, but like the whole physical thing, like, but anyway, like you could just clock somebody just like off a picture, like off a selfie or something. Like I don't know, maybe, but that's a whole other thing. Like the you don't look autistic thing. Like, but there are physical symptoms too as well. Apparently, I didn't know this was like a common thing until I looked into it. Joint issues is a thing, gut issues, digestive, which also kind of ties back into the rigid food thing. Like if you have certain sensitivities to certain foods, then it kind of on the outside it's like, oh, you just eat the same thing every day, but like really you're just trying to avoid discomfort and pain, especially when most of life is uncomfortable for you, if not painful for you, in terms of like you being sensitive to everything. So you try to control what you can control, and it just to minimize the stimulus, especially if it's painful stimulus to you, at least for me. So teach their own. And then also outside of this, there's the whole, the gut brain axis or microbiome connection, and which I'm not saying that like in a, it sounds like I'm trying to, like I'm mocking that, but like that does seem to be a real thing if you think about it. Like when you take uh, a aspirin or whatever, Excedrin, or the generic version, whatever. Shout out to the generic version. You take it and it goes in your stomach and it takes away your headache. That's always like a really interesting thing to me. That like that kind of proves it for me right off the bat. So I do agree with that there is a connection there. So the joint pain thing, as I was saying, hypermobility, your joints going further than what is the normal range of motion, which can lead to some instability, some clicking, some clacking, some discomfort, if not pain. And in a way, despite being like extremely flexible, it can lead to muscle tightness as a compensation. So you like your body's like, hey, yo, chill out. Don't you like you moving too much, and so just like lock things up and make things super tense to try to help you in a way, which is that's mostly when it comes to like the trauma things and all this. As a side note, that seems to be the common thing of like your body or your brain just doing things like to sort of help you, even though it doesn't necessarily work out like that, or shutting things down just automatically. So that also is a part of it too. Also, we'll throw in for the late diagnosed folks, imposter syndrome, or just feeling quite literally crazy and or insane in like in a literal way. Just like because it's like you finally have this word to describe you, but it's still just like you found out so late that it doesn't even. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it doesn't matter, or it's just like is it something else? Am I wrong? Is it? But despite the fact that I know everything, just this video itself is kind of like proof, if I ever needed it or anybody else ever needed it, to just be spouting off all of this off the dome pretty much, which is why it's taking so long for me to say it and there's so many pause breaks in between this. Like it's yeah, but still is that's a big part too. And being the finding out later is a it's a thing. It's an ordeal. Is that a word? I don't know if this counts as like a symptom, but just like questioning things. That's apparently there's something called existential OCD, which is like that's very interesting. I just thought it was like, oh, I thought everybody, just stayed up at night wondering why they're alive or why does anything exist or what is are we in an indifferent universe? Is this why does blah 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 happen? The cruelty or something. But no, that's also kind of tied into it in a way because you just want to know why things are the way they are. Something to do with apparently the brain stuff and just always questioning things and wanting more details and clearer explanations and answers, even if there aren't necessarily answers for the question that you're asking, which could be that's quite a dilemma. And you throw in like some rumination and it's, it could get pretty wild. Also, on a semi sadder note, along with the socializing thing, it can be difficult to relate to people just in general. Like, I guess to go along with the brain difference thing, and that obviously affects somebody and harder to get start any type of relationship, platonic or otherwise, and then maintaining it. That's a whole other thing. Unless you find your right, not right, but a group of people that are, if not also neurodivergent, just like the same on the same wavelength as they say, or vibe with you and all of that. But yeah, we'll throw in talking a certain way is also a thing. Like some some autistic people are said to have sound like they have accents or things or talk in a way that's different from what the rest of the people in their area talk like or group of people talk like sometimes. Then hopefully this might actually be the last thing I say. Who knows? But along the lines of communication differences, the most obvious one is like nonverbal. That's like the main one that people think of to the point where it's like if somebody could talk and they're autistic, it's like a contradiction to some people. It's like impossible, heresy. No, burn them at the stake is okay. I don't know if at this point I don't want to even joke about that part, but yeah, it's dare I say it's a spectrum, a circular sort of spectrum, and just at various varying levels of different traits and whatnots on a little wheel or something like that. Or if you want to think about it as like a control board with different knobs and doohickeys and things, just in the brain, I guess somewhat like inside out or something. It's just okay. But yeah, some autistic people do talk, and usually when they talk a lot until they get called out on it or something, and that's when the masking thing and and trauma and whatever school. I guess that's why I'm yapping so much right now. Um, I'm free for a little bit. It's like the genie when it came out the lamp in Aladdin. Just 10,000 years, and it will give you a crick in the neck. It's suppressing everything about you. Really, it can really do some things to you, building up a lot of pressure and whatnot. But this is close enough. That's it. Cool.